They say her name could cut deeper than a blade. Whispered across the burning dunes, Arawelo's legend lives not in royal scrolls, but in the trembling voices of men who feared her shadow. She was not born of silk and gold. She rose from dust and fire. In the land where the sun reigned mercilessly and tribes clashed for water and pride, a girl was born who would shatter every tradition carved by men. The first time Arawelo saw blood, it wasn't her own. She was 12. A woman in her village had defied her husband and paid with her life. No one wept. No one even whispered her name after that. But Arawelo never forgot. That day her silence turned to steel. As she grew, so did her fury. She trained in secret, knife, bow, her bare hands, and she listened to the old tales women told behind veils, to the rage buried in lullabies, and most of all, to the fear in men's laughter. Arawelo didn't ask for power. She took it. One night, she entered the tribal council, where no woman had ever dared step foot. Men reached for their blades. She smiled, placed her dagger on the table and said, "From now on, you'll bleed for your decisions, as we have bled for yours." And thus began the reign of the Desert Queen. A ruler, a myth, a warning. Arawelo's first decree was simple. Every man who dared strike a woman would face her justice, swift, brutal, and unforgettable. But her justice wasn't blind. It was sharp-eyed and cruel to those who had long wielded cruelty without consequence. She ordered the old council dismantled, not just disbanded, but humiliated. The men who once ruled the tribes were made to kneel before their wives and daughters, to wash their feet in front of the entire village. Those who refused, she exiled them into the desert without weapons. Most never returned. Women, long silenced, were suddenly judges, warriors, and sages. Arawelo didn't just crown herself, she crowned a new order. One led not by muscle, but by memory. Arawelo believed that pain carried wisdom, and women had carried it for generations. But her revolution came with a cost. Some men fled. Others plotted. They whispered of curses, demons, unnatural rites. Arawelo was called a sorceress, a succubus, even a she-jinn. The idea that a woman, a mortal woman, could wield such authority was more terrifying than any myth. One night, as the moon hung low and red over the sands, a group of warriors attacked her compound. They expected to find soft resistance, women with words, not blades. What they found instead were trained fighters, cloaked in shadows, moving like spirits. The battle was short. The message was eternal. After that night, Arawelo's legend became blood-written law. She began building what she called the House of Memory, a hidden fortress where only women trained and ruled. No man could enter, and those who tried disappeared into the desert winds. But not everything about Arawelo was war. She loved music. She painted her tent in colors that shimmered at sunrise. She recited poetry under the stars and taught young girls to write their names in the sand, again and again, until the earth remembered them too. But even legends bleed. Arawelo's dominion spread like a sandstorm, impossible to contain, reshaping the desert wherever it passed. Tribes that once mocked her name now sent offerings. Jewelry, spices, scrolls of forgotten wisdom. Some submitted from awe, others from fear. She accepted both, for she understood power was not about love, but about memory. And memory in the desert, was always carved in pain. Yet within her iron rule burned a softer fire, a secret many dared not whisper. Arawelo had once loved, deeply, foolishly, before she was queen, before she became the symbol that haunted men's dreams. His name was Harun, a hunter with eyes like onyx and hands rough from the bowstring. He spoke little, but listened like the wind, fully, attentively, as if every word from her lips could change the stars. They'd met by accident, by chance, or maybe by fate, when she was still just the daughter of a healer. And in those forgotten days, she had imagined a different life, one with laughter, with children, with stories whispered under woven blankets as the fire cracked, and the world felt small and safe. But fate is cruel to women who dream too softly. Harun vanished one season, taken, some say, by rival tribes. Others say he fled, unable to bear her strength. She never spoke of him again, not even once. But every year during the Festival of Winds, she would sit alone atop the tallest dune, staring into the night with a silence so heavy it pressed the stars into hiding. This loss, this ache, did not soften her. It sharpened her. It was after Harun's disappearance that the punishments began to grow more symbolic. Men caught abusing their wives had their hair cut and burned in public, a sign of dishonor. Those caught plotting against women were branded with a symbol she designed herself, a falcon's eye, forever watching. And those who tried to raise armies, they were castrated, not in secret, not in shame, but in ceremony. The desert people began to speak in hushed tones of the Queen of Knives, and she wore the name proudly. She adorned herself in garments embroidered with moons and bone, silent warnings stitched in beauty. Her hair, always braided in 3 strands, symbolized past, pain, and power. She carried no sword. She needed none. Her voice was blade enough. Children grew up chanting her name as both blessing and curse. Mothers told stories of Arawelo not as a monster, but as a mirror, one that showed what happened when a woman was pushed too far, silenced too long. And still, from distant lands, came challenges. Warlords, priests, so-called kings. They came bearing gold, steel, and arrogance. They left with silence. Some say their tongues were taken. Others say they returned, but different. Eyes downcast, words stolen by shame. One thing was always true. None of them ever dared return. Arawelo had become more than queen. She had become myth. There came a time when myths were no longer enough. Arawelo's kingdom, once whispered of in secret, became too loud to ignore. From the northern ports came traders with tales not of goods, but of women in armor riding wolves across the dunes. From the east came mercenaries who told of a city ruled without kings, where men bowed not out of tradition, but necessity. And from the south, from the courts of aging emperors, came something else entirely: fear. They called it blasphemy, an insult to order, a violation of nature itself. But what they truly feared was the echo of Arawelo's name in the mouths of their daughters. Rebellions did not begin with weapons, but with questions. And the question every girl began to ask was the same: why not me? As her legend swelled, Arawelo summoned builders, architects, scholars, all women. She envisioned a city unlike any other, a citadel of flame-colored stone carved from the bones of the earth, surrounded by gardens that bloomed even in the driest months. Water channels ran like veins through the heart of her domain, their engineering baffling even the wisest of men. Above her palace gates, chiseled in obsidian, were the words, "No voice shall rise above another here." And still, men came to test her. The bravest, or the most foolish, was a warlord named Barak, whose banners bore a serpent devouring its own tail. He rode with 500 soldiers, all trained in cruelty. They surrounded Arawelo's city like vultures circling a dying lion. She did not raise an army. She walked out alone, draped in black silk, gold dust on her cheekbones, hair tied with thorns. In one hand, she held only a cup of water. In the other, nothing. Barak laughed when he saw her, called her names no man had lived to repeat. She said nothing. She drank the water, slowly, then poured the rest at her feet. "Thirst will teach you," she said. Then she turned and walked back inside. By morning, half of Barak's army had deserted him. By the third day, the rest were begging at her gates. Barak was never seen again. Some claimed he was buried beneath the garden roots. Others say she let him live, made him a servant in her kitchens, nameless forever. But the truth? No one dared ask her. The city grew, wider, taller, wiser. Boys were taught poetry alongside warcraft. Girls trained in astronomy and defense. There were no prisons, only mirror chambers, where the punished were made to face themselves for days on end. Some called it cruel. Others called it divine. Still, for all her triumphs, there lingered a shadow. Every time a man knelt too quickly, or a woman raised her voice in worship, Arawelo would retreat. Alone, always alone. Behind locked doors, beneath star-carved ceilings, she would stare into a polished bronze mirror and whisper a name no one else remembered. Harun. Because even the strongest queens carry ghosts. Even the loudest legends have silences. And Arawelo's silence was the kind that echoed across centuries. Her name became legend. Her throne, long buried beneath sand and time, still casts a shadow over tales whispered by firelight. Arawelo was not merely a queen, she was a force, a warning, a curse wrapped in beauty and vengeance. Some say she vanished into the dunes. Others claim she became the desert itself, ever-changing, merciless, eternal. And when men speak too loudly of dominance, the wind reminds them, her eyes are still watching.